Hey everyone, it is Dave, and guess who's with us tonight? Yes, that's Bo right over there in the corner, just curling up on her blanket. Normally, we're out in the garden, and my channel is primarily walking out through the yard every week, seeing what's newly been planted or pruned or flowering, something like that. But I thought I would do a series of book collecting videos. I don't even know if I'd call it a collection, probably more of an obsession. And it's kind of like I'm not quite ready to call hoarders, but I should have their number handy just in case. Because I've probably got around 2,500 books in my collection, and it's time to get rid of some of those. It's time to revisit some of them that I haven't seen in a long time, or I bought to read and now they're buried in a closet somewhere. So what I figured I would do over the course of the summer at least is to go through and start just looking at my collection again. So I'm going to have you join me, and if that's not your game, that's totally okay, but I'm going to show you at least in this first video, some of my favorite books by the author Rossking. And Rossking is a really cool guy. In fact, these books are so favorite, they're always up here, right in my bookshelf. And Rossking was born in the early 1960s. He's Canadian by birth, but he lives in England along with his wife and spends a lot of time in Italy because he writes a lot about Italian art. I've been fortunate to meet him several times, and so I'm going to show you the collection I have of his books. And we're going to start with the first one that he did back in the mid-90s called Domino. And of course, there we go. There's maybe a little bit better view of the cover of it. It's just called Domino, and it takes place back in like the 1700s. I'll read you a little bit of the interior flap here. A dazzling novel of love and seduction, of deception, disguise, and ultimately murder. Domino marks the debut of an exciting and original writer. And I think I've got a picture of him, publicity photo back here. There we go. And again, cool guy. He's come out here. He always is on the book circuit. Generally writes a book about every 3 to 4 years. And he's written some incredible stuff. Now, Domino is a fiction book, as is his second one. So, actually have, now this is the English cover. This is the American cover. His second book is called Ex-Libris, which, again, probably not the best because it's really a reflective cover. But you can kind of see like the cool library down here and everything. And even the end papers are cool. I mean, it's just amazing. And in fact, let me show you the end papers for Domino too, because Domino, I absolutely love the end papers of this. All right. Ex-Libris is a story also set in the 1700s, and it's about this guy who's a bookseller, book dealer. In fact, let me read you the front cover here. A cryptic summons to a remote country house launches a London bookseller on an odyssey through 17th century Europe, given the task of restoring a magnificent library that was pillaged during the English Civil War. Isaac Inchbold finds himself slipping from the surface of 1660s London into an underworld of spies, smugglers, ciphers, and forgeries. How cool is that? And again, another great book. I don't know about Domino because I haven't read that yet. I have read Ex-Libris. It's amazing. And it is 2 stories kind of interweaved into one. So I love the way he does that. But those didn't make Rossking famous. What made him famous was this book called Brunelleschi's Dome. Brunelleschi's Dome is about the Florence Cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore. And this is a Gothic church. So in the 1200s, I think it's like 1298, it's built by this guy Arnolfo de Cambio. And they didn't have the technology to build the dome. So it literally sat here with an octagonal open space for 150 years before this guy named Brunelleschi comes around and figures out how to create this self-supporting dome while it's being built. So this is that story. I don't know if it's ever been in hardback. I've only seen paperback copies of it, and this is one of the cool things, is that Ross did sign this one. That's what his signature looks like. And it's a quick read. It's a great read. And he ends up with this book being on a PBS miniseries called Medici Godfathers of the Renaissance. And he's in the first section of that 4-part miniseries. The next book is called Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling. This is the story of the 4 years that it takes Michelangelo to create the Sistine ceiling. 1508 to 1512 is when he paints this. And, you know, normally when we think about, like, the Sistine ceiling, we just think it's this perfect story where this guy comes in and he paints the ceiling and everything just goes as planned, but it really doesn't. Michelangelo doesn't want to paint the ceiling. He's going to take off about halfway through the project and go back to Florence, and the Pope literally has to drag him back, kicking and screaming, to finish painting the ceiling. So that is a great story as well. Then he jumps to the modern age, and so we have what's called the Judgment of Paris. And the Judgment of Paris is about this painting here. It's called, in French, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, which in English is called Luncheon on the Grass. And this is a very, very controversial painting done in 1863 by Edward Manet. And it's the story of that painting and of the changing of the guard, where we are literally going from very traditional art forms to the first vestiges of modernism. And Edward Manet is the father of modern art. So it's a really important topic that he covers in this book, and it's a great and exciting story. So I have both the hardback and I've got the paperback. And of course the paperback here, I think, is also signed by Ross. Then we go back to the Renaissance with his next book, which is Leonardo and the Last Supper. Leonardo and the Last Supper, this was published in 2012, because I remember that because right after I got this book signed, I herniated a disc in my back, and it was miserable. I'd never been the same since that happened. And the Last Supper, of course, is the most important painting, arguably, because we've also got the Mona Lisa, by Leonardo da Vinci. And this is also a great, rich story of Leonardo really not wanting to complete this. Leonardo is a trained sculptor. He was also trained as a painter, but only in oil paints at a time where you really had to be a fresco painter. Giotto, Cimabue, Botticelli, Michelangelo, these were all fresco painters, and Leonardo didn't have that capability. He was never taught in that, and so he ends up getting a commission taken away from him for what's called the Sforza horse. Gigantic horse that would have alone put him in the history books if he had completed it. But the Duke Sforza, decided to go to war, and he took all the bronze to make cannons out of. And this is like a, hey, sorry I had to do that. We're going to give you a secondary project, which is painting this wall about 15 feet by 30 feet in a refectory where I have lunch every day. And a refectory is where generally the monks take their meals and someone at the front of the room reads from the Bible. So no one would have seen this painting. And Leonardo wasn't so pleased about it, but it ends up becoming one of the most important paintings not only of the Renaissance, but really of Western art. I think it's comparable personally to Starry Night by Van Gogh. And also, now that I've already passed it, I forgot there's another book which I've always loved. This is I Wish I'd Been There. And you have a handful of art historians, I should say, and they talk about areas of their specialty where they wish they could have lived through. This could have been the death of Alexander the Great is one of them, elections of specific popes. But rossking is in here, and his time period that he wanted to be in was Manet's Luncheon on the Grass. When that was shown in the Salon de Refusés, it was the first time we didn't have a normal salon. We actually had, I shouldn't say that, we had the normal salon, but there were like 3,000 artworks in 1863 that were not allowed into the salon, which is the art exhibit of the Louvre, the School of Fine Arts in Paris. And so they have the Salon de Refusés, the Salon of the Refused, and that's where Luncheon on the Grass gets placed. After that, probably his most famous book, and a really good book, is Mad Enchantment. And it's Claude Monet and the painting of the water lilies. And this is a great story. Not only does it bring Claude Monet to life, and we have to be careful because we have Claude Monet here and Edward Manet here. So even though their names are very, very similar to totally different people, Manet is... And they're both kind of wild when you think about it. They're both leading the avant-garde. This guy is the first one to do that, but he's going to die pretty young. He dies at the age of 51, 52, something like that. Complications of alcoholism and syphilis. And then Claude Monet becomes really this treasure of France, and he lives into his 80s. I think he dies at the age of 86. And he's just a totally awesome person. Avant-garde leader, in the 1860s, as we transition from Edward Manet into Impressionism. Impressionism is our first modern art movement, and this guy is the leader of that. This is a front cover. You can kind of see the famous bridge over the water lily ponds, and this is at Giverny, his estate in France. Ross has won a lot of awards for this book. And if you check out places like Vimeo and such, you can actually see him talking about this book for like an hour in length. And it's amazing how much material is packed into this book. And so this has been one of my favorites. And the last book that I've gotten from him, and this came out in 2021, is The Bookseller of Florence. And this is about a guy named Vespasiano. And he's this Italian guy, and he's literally making books back when you had to make books. They didn't come from a printer or anything. And, I mean, it's just incredible stories. And, again, a lot of videos on YouTube that you can find if you just look up The Bookseller of Florence, where Ross talks about this book as well. Now, one of the reasons I also like Ross is if you can remember back in 2020 and 21, travel wasn't that wonderful. And so he did not make a book tour for this book. So I went and wrote to him and actually didn't write to him. I wrote him an email. He sent me a letter back, and he sent me a book plate that I could put in this book so that all my books from him are signed. So I really appreciate that. And I thought, what a cool guy, just to pick up a random email from a fan and just asked for him to sign my book, even though we couldn't do it during that time period. So hopefully he'll be around. The next real cool book that he publishes, he did write one recently on the history of, is it the history of Italy? I think it was. A Short History of Italy is the title. And so I'm looking forward to his next either art historical novel or his fiction novel, if he ever writes another one of those. So that's kind of my first set of books. I always keep these close because they're my favorite. They go right behind me on the bookshelf here. And I think that is about it for tonight. I normally want to do these kind of late at night in the summer when everything's kind of cool and relaxed. My main areas of the collection, because I'll tell you about that right now, tend to be mysteries. In fact, the top two shelves here, those are all Sherlock Holmes books. I'm a big fan of weird fiction and H.P. Lovecraft. So, in fact, right over here, I have some Lovecraft books. And, of course, art, because I teach art. And gardening books. So I spent 27 years selling plants and in nurseries and doing landscapes and things like that. So I've collected a tremendous amount of gardening books too that I'm looking forward to showing you, because some of them are fantastic. They've got great pictures. They're concentrated on plants. I've got a book on Louisia. You know, it's like I've only probably seen Louisia a handful of times in my career, let alone there's a whole book on it that's really focused on that one particular plant. But I'm looking forward to it. I know Bo's looking forward to it too, because she loves to hang out, especially at night with nothing to do, because I don't let her out because of the raccoons and possums and things like that. But anyway, if you've made it to the end of the video, thank you very much. And I'll look forward to seeing you either in my next video on books or in my gardening videos, or even Sunday join me on the Late Late Horror Show.